My name's David Ludlum. I'm the executive director of the West Slope Colorado Oil and Gas Association. We are the local regional trade association for the energy industry in Northwest Colorado. A couple introductions. We have Ashley and Ann from COGA in Denver, who are our mothership, our affiliate organization that do great work statewide. We also have the president of our chapter board, Quint Shear, who's here today. I think he's out in the hall, but he's on hand. And then we also have Carly Nelson, who's our director of membership and events, and you probably saw her at the check-in table. So if you are a county commissioner or a municipal representative or a business leader or a civic leader of any kind, you probably are so busy with your lives you've never thought much about me, but on the off chance that you have, you've probably thought that guy is the most myopic, narrow-minded, obnoxious person in Northwest Colorado. And the reason you probably had that thought is because for the last 3 years I've been talking about nothing but Jordan Cove. And my hope for today is that by the time we're done with this presentation, you also are going around talking about nothing but Jordan Cove, because I do think it's that important. The last 3 years, the experience of being able to help out with this project taught me something. And that something is that many people will tell you that only big companies can accomplish big things. And that only big government can do meaningful things, and that only big personalities can make an impact. What I've learned is actually anybody can do anything if you just pick up the phone. So what I want to convey to you, what I've learned over the last 3 years with this project, is if you're sitting with that Wednesday malaise and your project's going nowhere and you're not getting anywhere, I would say coach yourself, tell yourself, pick up the phone. And if that doesn't work, you can even put an expletive in front of phone that rhymes with clucking, and I promise that little trick will work and you will take action. But the theme here is picking up the phone, and the first time that I picked up the phone was when the bottom fell out of the Piceance Basin. And as their trade representative, I was thinking, no offense to our commissioners here in Garfield County, but what does the land use code matter if we're not drilling or doing anything? We've got to also be focusing on the future, the long-term future. And so I picked up the phone and I called the Grand Junction Economic Partnership and I said, you know, we're not exploring for gas anymore, we're manufacturing it, and you work on manufacturing. Is there any way we could work together? And we sat down and we thought about, well, you know, there's compressed natural gas vehicles, and there's electric generation, and there's 24 LNG export terminal proposals around the country, not counting Canada. We thought, well, we can't write letters to all those, and maybe not all of them are equally as beneficial, but you know, we don't really know. This is a very complicated side of the business. So we picked up the phone and we called the CMU Conventional Energy Center, and Derek Wagner, who you met earlier, answered the phone and said that's just the kind of research that this Unconventional Energy Center was meant to look at. And so the Grand Junction Economic Partnership put together a proposal for a study. And the study initially was just to tell us, hey, if you're going to focus your time and energy and efforts into something, make sure it's the right terminal, make sure it's the right LNG project that's going to help you. And we got more than just that. We got a roadmap, and it was titled From the Piceance to the Pacific Rim. And the Piceance to the Pacific Rim really got traction in our community because it allowed us to take rambling conversations and hand-wringing about what we should do and focus it into something very pointed and very specific. And that was what you're about to hear about today from Jordan Cove. But our pick up the phone story didn't stop there. We knew that there was going to be a trip to Calgary. And so Bonnie Peterson and Diane Schwenke with AG&C, who's here today, and Diane Schwenke with the Grand Junction Chamber, picked up the phone and called me and said, we're going to Calgary. This company's based in Calgary. Why wouldn't we meet with them while we're there? And so we picked up the phone and we called Veresen and we said, we're bringing 20 people to your headquarters and we want to meet with your executives. Will you take the meeting? They said, sure. So they spent a few hours with us and they told us how the project would benefit our region, and we took that back to Northwest Colorado, and shortly thereafter gained the support of just about every elected official and entity I can think of in this area who has anything to do with energy development. And that did something important. It brought to the forefront something that you've seen unraveling, not unraveling, but actually unfolding in the newspapers over the last few weeks. That trip to Calgary, the Piceance to the Pacific Rim initiative, the The letters that our community has been sending in on every single permit and regulatory process is an example of where anybody who's willing to pick up the phone can accomplish and make a difference. And I think we can take that message or take that philosophy and try to continue to do good things to get us back on track. So what I've noticed is that then Bonnie picked up the phone after that and said, hey, Governor Hickenlooper, will you endorse the project? And I thought, well, yeah, it's an election year and it's a tough environment in Colorado right now for energy. Governor Hickenlooper said, absolutely, I'll do that. It's the right thing for the state and it's the right thing for Western Colorado. And then a couple people from our coalition picked up the phone and called Senator Bennett. And I thought, it's election year, it's Colorado. He said, absolutely, and I'll do you one better. I'll do a endorsement video, which I hope you go to the GJEP, Grand Junction Economic Partnership website and look at the video. It's a great endorsement. And really what those two have done, they've joined Senator Gardner and Congressman Tipton in Colorado to create a project that transcends the traditional boundaries and conflicts that we typically associate with big energy projects like this. And that transcendence has taken a number of forms. It's taken the form of, and the reason that it transcends is because we're exporting clean air overseas, who I think that brings a new constituency to the table. We are reducing our national trade deficit by having export projects like this. We are supporting our production locally. And that's something I think you're going to hear about today that's important, is this is not the type, the project like this one that will take a BCF out of the Rockies every single day. When you parlay that into what would that mean? How many rigs here would be required to support a BCF coming out of the Rockies every single day? If it all came out of the PNS, that's an 8 to 12 rig program. That's a lot more than we have today, and it certainly would be a great baseline for us to have. So that's why I've been talking about Jordan Cove nonstop, driving you all crazy, asking for letters. I'm going to continue doing that because I think the next step, and if you didn't see the news coverage yesterday when they were talking to some folks in Grand Junction, is we're going to bring their customers out here. We're going to bring the biggest LNG buyer in the world to the Piceance Basin to see what we have to offer, because we have things to offer that nobody else in the country does right now. And we're going to hear a little bit about that today as well. So the first person that I want to introduce is Michael Heinrichs. He is the Public Affairs Director for the project. And he was the first one who I called and stalked and bugged incessantly for several months to see what we could do to help. And since then, we've developed a great rapport and relationship and working really well together to the point where now I call him a friend. I'd like him to say a few words to kick things off here about the Jordan Cove LNG export terminal in Coos Bay, Oregon. So please welcome Michael Heinrichs.
Thank you. Speak from out over here. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for hosting us. We have had an incredible time presenting yesterday and, of course, here today. It's not often that we get in a room of so many people who support our project, so it's a little different, a little weird, little catching me off guard from what I typically do in Oregon. I do want to start out by thanking David and Muskoka for the unrelenting leadership and spearheading of a mobilized effort here that has certainly sent waves across to Oregon. In Oregon, as you can imagine, this project has political sensitivities, and though our congressional delegation in Oregon is supportive, they're certainly more quiet about it. Our state legislature is a little more vocal, local county commissioners are a little more vocal, but it was incredible to see just the groundswell of support from here, producers, local counties, individuals, nonprofits, the Chambers Economic Development Partnership. You heard the elected officials. I mean, these are people who have decided to take a leadership role, take a stance, and start putting pressure on our leaders back in Oregon, which is a huge support as we move through the permitting process. The other reason we're here is, as David mentioned, and as Blaine and Bob will get into, it's kind of why is this important? Why are we actually here? Why are we starting with the Western Slope? Where are we in the project? And we want to emphasize that over the course of the last, let's call it 4 years that our project has been moving through the permitting process, we've been focused on the permitting as well as our customers in the Asia Pacific region. We have now reached the time in which that is fully underway, and it's now time to reach out to the supply side and the upstream producers and all the economic planners that are here in the room. So you're going to hear a lot about kind of what our project means in Oregon and why we would be out here and what it means for you. So to give a general overview, they of course are going to get into details, but the Pacific Connector pipeline would connect in southern Oregon to the Ruby pipeline, which brings gas from the Rocky Mountains. We would move 230 miles northwestward to the port of Coos Bay, right on the coast. Used to be a big timber hub, and as the timber industry declined, that's an underutilized port, so we're looking to use facilities there, as well as build our own, a liquefied natural gas export facility. It's a giant refrigerator to liquefy natural gas, put it on ships, and send it to, we have a focus on Asia Pacific, but right now specifically Japan. That is the largest growing market in the world. We have contracts, well, agreements with the world's largest LNG buyer, and we're going to get into all of that. That's really all I wanted to tee up. I really just wanted to say thank you for your support. Thank you for being so active. Please keep it up because it helps us back in our state push this project forward. Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Michael. So our first presenter today is Blaine Burt, and I don't know if the picture's up yet. I snuck a slide into his PowerPoint, didn't tell him about it. This is pretty funny. You might see that the coverage from the Daily Sentinel yesterday. I do my job every day trying to humanize our industry and tell the world that they are people and not autotrons. I thought it was interesting that Blaine called the paper and demanded that they use this black silhouette picture of him, not thinking that it undermines my effort in trying to make sure that people don't view us as faceless. But anyway, I found out that although this project is far away, we have a lot in common. In fact, Blaine lives here in Colorado. I learned that, and has connections to a lot of the people in the industry here. But he's going to talk to you about the Pacific Connector pipeline, which, if you saw the FERC denial, was part of the reason that the project was initially denied by FERC. And so I think it's important for Colorado to understand how the Pacific Connector fits into the larger export terminal. And you'll see that it definitely is him when you see his profile up here in a second. So welcome, Blaine.
Thank you. I didn't know that my profile was photogenic. So I'm Blaine Pritchett. I work for Williams Company, and I am located out of Denver. I am the project director for Pacific Connector, and I just want to share with you that we are utilizing a lot of resources out of Denver, whether it's an engineering company, environmental scientists. The project team is basically focused in Salt Lake City, and that's where the Northwest Pipeline asset is run out of. We have a team of about a dozen people there working on the project. We have 2 land offices in Oregon, one in Medford and one in Roseburg, and we have about a dozen people out there performing field activities associated with the project. So there is a large staff behind me, and every day we are progressing this project, and hopefully we get it all the way to the finish line. But what I want to talk about briefly today is just to give you a high-level view of the scope of the project, where we're at as far as permits and land acquisition, and just touch on opposition and people like you who support the project, and we appreciate that. So Pacific Connector, as Michael pointed out, it closes the gap between where Ruby ends in southern Oregon and Malin, Oregon, and Pacific Connector connects the Malin trading hub to the Jordan Cove LNG facility. So that's about 232 miles away. And Malin trading hub being right there. Here's Ruby coming from the Opal, and GTN is another delivery point into Pacific Connector potentially. And Williams currently operates Northwest Pipeline, which many of you are probably aware of. It's a great fit for Williams. Williams will be the operator of Pacific Connector gas pipeline. We have a current district office in Eugene that fits right into the portfolio in Southern Oregon. So what is Pacific Connector? Well, it's a $1.74 billion investment, and combined with the Jordan Cove investment, it'll be the largest private investment in Southern Oregon's history. It's a 232-mile, 36-inch pipeline. We call it a bullet pipeline. Gas is going to come in at Malin Hub and be delivered to Jordan Cove. There's an opportunity to take gas off on a short haul capacity where Pacific Connector intersects the Northwest Pipeline right here. And there'll be about 40 million cubic feet a day available to take off for short haul capacity to any customers that subscribe to that capacity during open season. There's one compressor station, and it is located at Malin. In that compressor station, we'll have 3 compressors, each at 20,000 horsepower. One of those is a spare. It's important that this pipeline be able to deliver and have reliability so that Jordan Cove can liquefy gas and meet their customer demands. So we'll have a spare unit on standby so that we have a almost 99% reliability or even 100% reliability runtime to deliver that 1 BCF of gas every day. Since the FERC denial on March 11th, the Veresen Jordan Cove folks have gone out and gotten subscriptions or firm service agreements for the pipeline for up to 77% of capacity. And there are 3 customers so far that have subscribed that make up that 77% capacity. It's Macquarie Capital, Avista, which is a local LDC in Oregon, and Jordan Cove. And Jordan Cove is subscribed to the 592,000 decatherms, and that is equal to the volume required for Jera and Atuchu, 2 of their customers, and that's for 50% of the liquefaction capacity of the plant. And then Jordan Cove itself is subscribed for 142,000 decatherms, so they can go and market that additional capacity. There's an open season planned for this year, and it will occur once the anchor shippers have firmed up further commitments for more than just 77%. And that open season should happen by the end of the year. And that will give the local market the opportunity to subscribe to the 40 million cubic feet a day that's available for short haul capacity to deliver to additional customers in Southern Oregon. I want to share something that's unique about this project that's not common, that you may not be aware of in Colorado. While there's a lot of public lands in Colorado, this project in general terms has about 1/3 public land, 1/3 private land, and 1/3 timber companies. Timber companies are publicly and private companies that grow and harvest timber for sale in Oregon and nationally. And you can see the mileage breakdown, but going a little further, this project is a timber clearing project before it's a pipeline construction project. That's one thing unique about it. We have about 41 miles of old growth timber that has to be harvested. There's about 44 miles of cereal timber, which is the mid-range of age of timber, and about 61 miles of reproduction and clear cut. So that's only 146 miles of the 232 miles. The balance of the pipeline is made up of rangeland, agricultural land, and there's 2.7 miles of offshore lay in Coos Bay, where the LNG terminal is. It's a shallow water estuary that in order to reach the LNG plant, we have to go through a shallow water estuary to deliver gas to Jordan Cove. This is just an update as of last month on our land rights acquisition. We have, last year we started acquiring permanent easements and temporary easements and construction right-of-way easements from landowners that were willing to work with us. And it was a very limited program. We have limited funds. Since the project hasn't been fully sanctioned yet, we identified critical properties we wanted to acquire, such as compressor stations, mainline valve locations, launcher receiver stations, those type of surface facilities. So to date, out of the 264 private landowners that are affected by the project, we've acquired about 25% of those land rights from those landowners. That's about 66 landowners. Timber companies, since there's a large cash outlay to acquire land rights from a timber company, the land in Oregon isn't of significant value. The value's in the trees. So since there's a significant cash outlay with timber companies, we're deferring them until closer to FID when the project is sanctioned, and we'll make substantial payments to those companies. So we haven't targeted timber companies, and that's why we only show that we've acquired 2 to date. Permits, I just want to touch on. There's multiple permits, and we view this year as critical to receiving many of our permits, whether it's federal and state. Hopefully we get a positive decision on a rehearing request from FERC, and that would be a substantial milestone for the project to get that positive decision. But I want to point out the metrics here, and they're at the bottom. To date, we've received 0 federal and state permits. We're awful close to getting our air permit for our compressor station. We have received in each of the county our conditional use permits from each county. Counties have been, their process is very predictable and dependable, and we can actually move through those processes easier than we have been with other permits. The FERC permit is, as I stated, critical to receiving here soon, and the other permit is the BLM land grant, and that will grant us basically an easement on public lands, on BLM land, Forest Service land, and some small tracts of the Bureau of Reclamation over on the east end of the pipeline. This is a potential project timeline that we see for the project. Currently, we're in the permitting and land rights acquisition. As I stated, we're hopeful to get almost all of our permits this year. Some of them will extend into next year. Our land rights, we're proceeding on a very slow, calculated budget, and we expect to, once we receive our permits, and should achieve project milestone or FID sanctioning sometime next year is what we're hopeful for. Construction timeline, we're looking at about 2 years to construct the pipeline. 1 year to clear timber, and 1 year to construct the pipeline. We're looking at about 5 spreads to cover the 12-month construction window for the pipeline itself. It'll take us about a month to commission the pipeline and compressor station, and that's the last task before we deliver first gas to Jordan Cove, and they proceed into their commissioning efforts. With the FERC denial on March 11th, it hasn't affected any of our work activities, tasks, or plans, nor our budget. We continue to progress the work irregardless of the FERC decision. And we had originally scheduled to go out for competitive bids to EPC contractors in April, and we did accomplish that task. So we're bidding right now the project to a single contractor. We plan on awarding it to a single contractor that can handle all the engineering, procurement, and construction as a lump sum turnkey contract. There are 5 bidders that are currently have just received the bid package. There's one of them out in Oregon this week, flying the right-of-way, looking at critical sites, and assessing the site conditions as part of the bid preview. We plan on awarding the contract by the end of this year, and that leads us into 2017, where we're more than likely in position to either issue a limited notice to proceed to the contractor to begin some preliminary engineering, survey, geotech work, or if the permits fall in sooner and we reach milestones, we'll issue a full notice to proceed sometime early next year after the contract's executed. So I want to touch on opposition. We've had very friendly opposition at all of our meetings. Meetings like this would be predominantly dominated by the opposition, and it's a pleasure to actually have the opportunity to speak to people that support the project, and I appreciate that very much. The opposition has appeared at our offices in Medford twice. That's the 2 pictures on the left and right. Opposition is anywhere from a high school student to a granny, and they're very friendly, salt-of-the-earth people. The middle picture is a flyer that showed up in the Denver office between Christmas and New Year's. I won't read the details, but they found us in Denver, and they decided to put us on notice and slip the flyers underneath the door during the holidays when no one was there. So that's what current opposition looks like. Future opposition. The middle picture is a postcard we received during the Christmas holidays from Earth First. And they said, "We're ready for you. Are you ready for us?" And if you look closer at the picture, you can see some tree squatters. This is what we expect on the project. No surprise, when we go into timber clearing operations, we'll have opposition doing different direct actions as depicted in these pictures. It's expected. And I want to thank everyone in this room, the sponsors, for this opportunity. This is a great project for the benefit of the West Slope and for the nation and for our trading customers in the Asia-Pacific Rim. I want to thank David Ludlam for this opportunity. And Pat McCowan, he invited me to participate in this back in October. I know he's not here today for other reasons, but I want to thank Pat and all the elected officials, organizations for your support. There's still an opportunity to submit a letter of support, whether it's an individual in this room or an organization, whatever you however you may want to represent yourself. You can go to the FERC e-filing website, and you can submit a comment using either one of those two docket numbers listed here. Those docket numbers either are part of they're a docket number for Pacific Connector, and the second number is the docket number for Jordan Cove. Either one would work just fine. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bob so he can address Jordan Cove.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine, and thank you for the kind words. Although I would say that the reason they're here today is actually because of the Garfield County Commissioners, specifically Commissioner Sampson, who went to Calgary, and the first thing he said when he got off the plane back here was, sometime over the next year, we're going to get those guys to come here. This is an important project, so thank you, Commissioner, for helping make that happen. Our next presenter is Mr. Bob Braddock, and if you are in your 30s and you're starting to think you're compiling career accomplishments, never go to dinner with Bob, because he will make you realize how far you have to go in terms of accomplishing big things. He has worked on some of the most interesting projects that I've ever heard about, and I also learned that he worked with my great uncle right here in western Colorado well before I was born, and so he knows the Piceance Basin very well, and he's worked here for a lot of years. He's also a resident of Colorado, but I'll encourage you to look at his bio. It's on page 15 of your program, and I think his title as the Senior Project Advisor is very modest. I learned a few nights ago that actually he is the one who conceptualized and first envisioned Jordan Cove in 2013, was it, Bob? 2003, yes. So it's been a long time coming. So with that, please welcome Mr. Bob Braddock, who is the Senior Project Advisor for Jordan Cove.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you all for having us here today. There's a lot of information here. I don't want to mow you over with it, but there's a lot of interesting stuff, so we'll try and focus on the things that I think are both important to understand the project, but more specifically for how this project truly does have the potential to be a transformative positive for the community. The Jordan Cove project is backed by Veresen, the folks up in Calgary whom I work for. Veresen is a energy resource midstream company. We own pipelines, power plants, gas processing facilities. We do not produce natural gas. And in the LNG facility, we will not own that natural gas that comes into it. Our customers buy the gas, we convert it to LNG to load it on their ships so they can move it to their markets. So Veresen does that sort of thing. They also are a 50% owner of the Ruby pipeline, which is a logical interconnection, our feed point to the Pacific Connector pipeline, which then feeds the LNG terminal in Coos Bay. The LNG terminal is simply, as Michael has identified, a large refrigerator. You take natural gas in at nominal room temperatures, and you cool it to minus 260 degrees, at which point it becomes a liquid. When it's a liquid, you can then store it easily in essentially large thermos bottles, and then ship it. The facility that we have has 2 large thermos bottles, each of them holding 160,000 cubic meters of LNG. Each of those tanks, and you'll see pictures of those tanks later on, is about 300 feet in diameter, so to give you a sense. We will process nominally 1 BCF a day, converting that into 6 million tons of LNG per annum. We are building an LNG marine facility, but to support the facility, we also have a power plant and gas conditioning unit, LNG facility where we liquefy, and loading terminal. The area in here in this rendering is actually owned by one of the largest privately owned timber companies in North America, Roseburg Forest Products. This is their wood chip export terminal. It is the largest wood chip export terminal in North America. They ship wood chips to Japan, at which point they use them to make paper. So they have a connection with us. They're very good neighbors. The thing that Blaine mentioned is that right now the pipeline, are going through their bidding process for construction of the pipeline. We are going through a comparable process for construction of the terminal. We have shortlisted our bidders to 2, and they are large consortia. One is comprised of CB&I and Chiyoda, we call it CCJV. The other is Kiewit, Black & Veatch, and JGC, a Japanese engineering company. Each of those is in the process of going through development of our feed package. The front-end engineering design for the entire facility. That work will encompass roughly 200,000 engineering man-hours this year, of which we are paying each of those companies approximately $25 million apiece to give us a fixed price contract on this job. That work should be done end of the 3rd quarter, early 4th quarter, and we will make a decision on the selected contractor by the end of the year, being able, in parallel with Pacific Connector, to issue a limited notice to proceed by early next year, or a full notice to proceed by the latter part of 17. Just to give you a sense.
If there's some hard time hearing, turn away from the mic.
Great. This will end up being a facility that is very similar. What you see in the drawing are 2 LNG tanks being constructed in Egypt. The loading facility is actually in Indonesia on the other side. Our terminal will be a large construction activity. 8 million man-hours of work on site, estimated construction duration of roughly 24 months, with a peak construction input of 2,100 workers, average of 930, with an in-service date of early 2022. Schedule, as Blaine indicated, we have a 2022 in-service date. I think one of the critical things that we are most concerned about is, at this point, is the 3rd bullet from the bottom, which is by the end of this year, and I have a series of question marks, FERC certificate. We do expect to get a FERC certificate. We're hoping that with the request for rehearing, that they reopen the docket and do consider the additional information that we've put in. If not, we will refile. Go through the process. We will not stop the project. The one problem with refiling adds timing uncertainty, which is something we all try and avoid. So how does this interact with you folks here? You're in a production area, an existing, well-developed production area, which has transitioned, as most of the gas industry has, from a discovery and development operation to a manufacturing operation. Gas is now not something that you go out and find. You know where it is. You refine the techniques by which you get it. You have done that here. Not only have you done that during the boom periods that you've experienced, you have built out the infrastructure for delivery. You are now interconnected at a high level with the national grid. So you can move gas, theoretically, all over North America from a wellhead here. The problem you have is that that too has happened in the East, so traditional markets have been lost. So what we have now is a situation where your traditional markets are lost and displaced by producers closer to the market. So what do you have? You get pushed towards the Pacific. And when you get to the Pacific, a pipeline won't work. To get to another market, we've got to load it on a ship. And that's Pacific Ocean, and that's our terminal. So we are there, and our terminal is here, and from there you can access a tremendous number of current purchasers of liquefied natural gas who use it in their economy to power their electric grids to displace coal and oil, either dirtier fuels or more expensive fuels. This is what they're driving to do. They want to go to gas to make a clean transition. So we have, in effect, with you on the first slide, which is the development end, where the production, liquefaction in Coos Bay, we load it on a ship in Coos Bay, we load it when it gets to the destination, in our case, let's say Tokyo, there's a terminal, they store it. From the terminal, it's dispatched to where they use it to generate electricity. The types of vessels that we will be using, that they typically use, are 160,000 cubic meters, roughly the size of the tanks I had indicated there, holding the equivalent of 3.4 BCF of gas per ship. So in March of this year, we entered into an agreement for 25% of the capacity dedicated to JERA, a joint venture of the first and third largest electric utilities in Japan, TEPCO and Chubu. In early April, we entered an agreement for another 25% of the capacity with the Japanese trading company Itoshu. They are the second largest trading company in Japan and act as an aggregator to supply smaller utilities and smaller gas users. Itoshu is second to Mitsubishi as the largest trading company in Japan. Japan is comprised of 10 utilities, electric utilities, that serve the entire country of 127 million people. Itoshu and Chubu and TEPCO are two utilities that are located adjacent to each other. And on the drawing, they are the light gray area and the light tan area. And they serve roughly 48% of the population of Japan. This is one terminal that TEPCO owns. It is a terminal, one of 4 terminals on Tokyo Bay. This terminal receives one LNG vessel call every 5 days. Their terminals in Coos Bay, the TEPCO terminals in Coos Bay, receive one vessel call every 18 hours. So they are, and this is why we asked Blaine and the pipeline people, they have to have a spare compressor on the pipeline because reliability of supply is crucial. TEPCO receives 44 vessel calls per month. like clockwork, coming from all points of the globe. They come in, they dispatch, they go back again. It is, as I define it, it's a UPS driver. Same route every day. They just keep going round and round with a certain number of vessels dedicated to it. Just a quick overview, these are the terminals, the power plants that TEPCO has around Tokyo Bay. Why is it important? Because in March of 2011, TEPCO was receiving 27% of their electricity from nuclear power. Japan was getting 30% of their electricity from nuclear power. On the 11th, with the Tohoku earthquake and subsequently damage to the Fukushima reactor, every nuclear power plant was shut down in Japan and has gradually been increased. Japan was on a trajectory to increase from generating 30% of the electricity nationwide by nuclear up to 40%. That event changed everything. They went back to the drawing board, and in February of this year came out with a grand plan that designed said we need to bring in more LNG to displace the oil and the coal as well as the nuclear. So they are a long-term committed buyer to LNG. Japan imports 95% of their energy, and of which comprise the energy from LNG, they are handling 35% of the global trade. JERA alone is essentially 16% of the global trade. So we're dealing with the largest user of LNG in the world. The locations that historically they've come from are the brown dots. The green dots here are new sources. We're one of them. What they want to do is move away from dependency on LNG from the Middle East, Russia, and Oceania, which comprises Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei, and get more from stable political environments such as Australia and North America. Notice there's nothing in here from North America in 2013. They want to change that so at least 10% of the mix is from North America to reduce their dependency on the other more sensitive geopolitical areas. Why do they think this is a good location at Jordan Cove? 9 days shipping from the West Coast versus 19 days from the Gulf of Mexico. Plus, we don't have to deal with the hassles of going through the Panama Canal, possible congestion. To summarize it, the customers that we are serving have a need for reliable long-term supply of LNG. They need it to keep the lights on. They want it to conform to Paris protocols. They want to wean themselves of the dirtier fuels. This gives them an opportunity. In our business, they enter into contracts for 20-year duration. These folks that we talk to that have 50% of the capacity are talking about this is a lockdown take-or-pay commitment for 20 years from first delivery. That is the kind of stable market that we think you are looking for. You want to get out of the boom and bust cycle, build a base load that can sustain a vibrant energy industry without the ups and downs. That is what Coos Bay is looking for. This is what we believe this project will do for both Coos Bay and for Western Slope producers and the communities. Thank you.
Well, thanks to all three of you. And Kirby, we're running a little bit behind. Do we have time for a few questions?
A couple of questions again, sure.
Okay, so we'll take a few questions, but before that, some of you who are involved with county planning or from a municipality may be wondering, well, why does this matter to the larger theme of of the forum, the symposium. And I think Bob just said it right. You know, you look at these long-term hedge deals that some of our other companies have done. Well, this is one of those on steroids. And if we could get a deal like this in place in the peons, it certainly would be relevant to community development departments and planners who are trying to predict what the future will look like for their local government and communities. So with that, do we have a couple questions for any, Mr. Brennan?
Question for Blaine. Do you anticipate issues in the project related to the merger or non-merger that
The question is, do I anticipate any issues with the merger or non-merger of Williams and ET? No.
Well played, Blaine. Do we have any other questions?
There's one back there.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my question is, and this is kind of political, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. Does this have anything to do with the Pacific Rim trade deal that we hear so much about, that everybody used to be for and now they're against?
That's another answer.
Did this come about because of that?
Here, I'll answer that. No, it does not. So, though TPP does, of course, cover Japan and a whole host of other things, we have and have gone through a process with the Department of Energy to receive our non-free trade agreement license, giving us the right to trade with Japan. So TPP doesn't help, doesn't hurt. We don't have any part of that. So completely separate.
One more? Rachel?
Thank you so much for the detailed presentation. That was really very informative. I'm just kind of wondering, you know, we're all clearly in a glut situation for both the oil and natural gas now. But if this new market opens up, what are you anticipating that will do to the price of natural gas for U.S. residents and Colorado residents?
Yeah, Bob, you want to tackle that one?
We have done the analysis and had numerous firms do analysis on this, but Navigant Consulting did an analysis based on a much higher level of exports than we're currently, and we think it's actually negligible to non-measurable given the surfeit of production that's there, particularly as more and more natural gas production has moved to associated gas production. So there's plenty of dry gas production to back in as soon as prices even move up a fraction of a cent, I think. So.
Well, again, thank you all for your time and attention and for the good questions. And I hope that whether you support the project or don't, that this has given you something to think about in terms of how the largest energy project west of the Continental Divide could potentially benefit our region economically. So please join me in thanking our guests here today from Jordan, Cove, and Williams.
And we'll be around later.
Michael also indicated that they will be around for a little bit to ask questions, so you can grab one in the hallway.